on tonight. He's down in Philadelphia, and he was kind enough to present to us tonight. So, Bob, you'll be highlighted here, and we're looking forward to your slides and your presentation. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Tim, and good evening, everybody. It's really a pleasure for me to be talking to you, the Mercer County Amateur Radio Club. I'm going to tell you something. This is a first in terms of me actually addressing a whole club like this using Zoom. I'm a big user of Zoom in my day job. In fact, ever since COVID, it's taught me that it can be a really nice tool to use, and then it's carried over into amateur radio. I've had lots of Zoom meetings where I've presented as a speaker, but not to a group like this. It's always been people on the screen where everybody's at home. You probably have done that as well. But I'm here to tell you this is the first time Mercer County is a first, and I kind of like this model. In fact, and I'll blame this on you folks, I'm going to tell other clubs around Atlantic Division, which is a long drive from me, that if they want to do this kind of format, I'm likely to be available much more than if I have to drive 12 hours to somewhere. As you heard, my name's Bob Famiglio, K3 Romeo Foxtrot's my call sign. I've been an ARRL member since I became licensed in January of 1967, and I became your Atlantic Division director last January. It was kind of a surprise to me and probably to a lot of other people. I had been your vice director. Wasn't that they just pulled me off the street somewhere, but I've been your vice director for a while, having handled, I think I've gone through about 2.5 terms as a vice director. The vice directors and directors are elected every 3 years in rotations of once every year. There's 5 directors and vice directors elected, so a total of 15. So we change the board of directors, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Every year you get 5 more people, or either coming back or new folks. I'm located in Media, Pennsylvania. It's not really Philadelphia. Philadelphia is 12 miles away, and that's plenty close for me because I'm a suburban kind of guy. And Delaware County, where I'm located, it's about, as I said, 12 miles west of Philadelphia. And it gives us more room to have antennas and a lot less RFI, as we'll be also talking about tonight, some of the problems that I see. Now, let me share my screen. Let's see if I get this to work, because you're the guinea pig. Because if this works, I'm going to be doing this for all the other clubs that want me to come up and talk with them. By the way, while I'm doing this, Atlantic Division is 5 states and 7 sections. As you know, and we'll talk about, we have 15 different divisions. Our division, your division, goes from Northern New York, Western New York section, Eastern and Western Pennsylvania, where we all are, all of Maryland, all of Delaware, DC, of course, and Southern New Jersey. So that can be a long drive. By the way, Tim, is my audio okay? I may have asked you before, but I just want to make sure because I'm using a hybrid. Can everybody hear me all right? Just raise your hand if I'm
We hear you fine. Just don't move off your mic. When you move, it goes down.
Okay, good. Good. And I see there's about a 3-second latency between my audio and the video. That won't be a problem. Let me just turn this phone off here, just so you know that there is a latency. Now, I'm using the microphone on my headset, and I'll try to keep it in the right position. And I just asked if you have trouble hearing me, just interrupt me, raise a hand, say turn up the gain or turn the beam. I found that this microphone just works better, but I have you all on the speaker. So anyway, that's the Atlantic Division. What I'm going to do now, let me get this up and share the screen. Let's see, share screen 4. PowerPoint slideshow. I think this will do it. Let's see. Can you know? Are you seeing my slideshow? Can you see RARRL today? Is that on your screen? If not, tell me.
No, it's there.
Okay, good. And the reason I can't tell is because I've got 4 screens. So if I look like I'm not looking at you, I actually am looking at you over here, and you're seeing me over here. So let's get started. Our ARRL today. I'm assuming most of you are ARRL members, and if you're not, that's fine. You should join. But let me tell you a little bit about our league. Some things you may not know, some things you probably do know. We're going to talk about who, what, where, and why, as you can see on the screen. And I promise I'm not going to, this is not going to be death by PowerPoint. I just use the PowerPoint to sort of keep me on track. So let's go through a few things. This is a hybrid PowerPoint because I want to keep enough time at the end that all of you can ask me the hard questions that you were dying to ask, but afraid or something like that, because I'm here to answer all your questions about what we do at the ARRL and why, and to hear your concerns as well, because as you'll hear in a little bit, I believe the ARRL, the league, belongs to you. And as director, I don't represent the ARRL down to you. I represent you up to our national league. I feel very strongly about that. So we're going to talk about that. Now let's see if I get this to change. Okay. There we are. So what's the ARRL? This stuff you already know, I think, or advance the art, science, and enjoyment of amateur radio. It's kind of a no-brainer. That's our mission statement of sorts. And I think it's pretty clear what the ARRL is supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be representing the members, all of you, and what's best for amateur radio generally and for the members specifically. We have a vision statement. I won't bore you too much with this. Every outfit has a vision statement now. I guess it's it came in vogue a few years ago. We are the National Association for Amateur Radio. And in the United States, we do these things I'll talk about in a minute. But we are the only, in my view, National Association for Amateur Radio to represent your interests. Our interests, includes mine as a member myself, to things like the FCC, to Congress, to the public, and all the different things we need to do in order to keep our advocation, our favorite activity, alive and well and healthy. And we're going to get into that in a few minutes. We support the awareness and growth of the amateur radio, well, the worldwide, actually. We're not just United, we're a U.S. membership group, but we also lead the world societies in representing amateur radio. We advocate for the meaningful access to radio spectrum. That's real important. We're going to talk about that a little bit, because that's one of the major things that concerns me. And we're going to talk about what our challenges are and what the ARRL and what you can do to help us all meet those challenges in amateur radio. And as you can see here, as I put down, we strive for every member to participate, get active, get on the air, to try to get newcomers that have just got their license to stay as active amateur radio operators, many of them to get their technician entry class license. Don't always get on the air. If they do, they go away in a month or 2 or 3. And it's up to all of us, including specifically the clubs like Mercer County, to make sure those new amateurs that you get licensed get some assistance they may need to feel comfortable using a radio, getting a radio. Which one should they buy? Did they get the right one? You get the wrong one, and newcomers go away real fast. We encourage experimentation, advancement in radio art. Many of us way back in the day when my hair was black and not white, that's what brought us into amateur radio. We love technology. I blame amateur radio for making me interested in electrical engineering, which is my undergraduate studies in college. And it was because of amateur radio. I'm quite sure of that. We organize and train volunteers to serve communities providing emergency services. I know you folks are all into that, as I heard at your business meeting. There's a good reason for that, not only because it's a nice thing for everybody to do, but it's really one of the major reasons that amateur radio has the spectrum that we have. And we have some real spectrum challenges, as I'll get to in a minute. Well, and as I said, amateur radio is public service. It's a valuable emergency communications resource. And if we don't do that, all the other things we like to do in amateur radio that isn't necessarily public service events may not be around for as long as we all hope they will be. Where the league is advocacy, you know all this, and we'll talk about some of the bills that we have pending that no doubt you'll have some questions about. We need a voice, a strong voice, and ARRL is the only national association that does that. We're the only national association for amateur radio. There's lots of clubs around, and that's very important. There's other magazines, perhaps, and there's publishers and so forth. There's lots of YouTube channels, but they don't represent amateur radio the way your league does. It's education, you know that. We talked about books, Don't forget to learn or don't forget how to read after you get your license. ARRL does a lot of publishing, but there's lots of good books out there. There's lots of ways to advance your interest in amateur radio, become knowledgeable about electronics and communications generally. We're about technology. I don't have to tell you that. And ultimately, we're about membership. We're stronger with more people than less. Now, it's no secret that we have a few less members this year than we had last year. But that is something, and people ask us, why is that happening? Well, I call it the graying of our advocation. In other words, the average age of our membership, and all amateur radio operators for that matter, is drifting upwards slightly. It's not like it used to be way back in the day. What happens is that we are the same. That is, the league has the same issues that other organizations have, whether they're technology or hobby organizations or whatever they might be. We have trouble getting volunteers or membership people to come into the activity, or at least, even if they're interested in the activity, to get involved in a group league like the ARRL, because I don't really see the value in it. You'll do it for us. They would think, why should I join? Particularly if it's going to cost me $50, which might go up. And we'll talk about that too. No doubt you've heard of some of the challenges we have going ahead. But membership in all kinds of worthwhile organizations is either stagnant or going down slightly. And that's, pardon me, that's a sign of the times, I think. Now, I find a lot of members don't realize how the ARRL is organized, even if they had been members or a life member like myself or my wife. She's a life member as well, but been a ham for a long time. But even life members aren't always aware of how the ARRL is organized. They know we have section managers and we have some directors and we have this, that, and the other person who runs things, and are not always clear how that works. I think as a director representing your interests, you need to know how they work so that you can get involved. And there are ways to get involved in making your particular understanding or choices known about where you think we ought to be going. We won't always agree, but we should raise our voices when we have a concern. That's happened in the past when there's challenging issues like the bandwidth restrictions way back in the day. The biggest controversy was incentive licensing. That was a real ruckus. And I think people need to get involved. Now, you probably know, as you heard, there are 15 directors. It's because there's 15 divisions, Atlantic being one of them. Your Atlantic being the second largest division, I think, in terms of population of membership, if you will. The Southeast division is the largest. It's no surprise that that's Florida, Alabama, and South Carolina, I think. 3 states, but it's got a large population of hams, and I think they all come from Florida. If you, to be honest, that's where much of the weight of that organization membership or the division comes from. The board of directors have a direct responsibility. Our job is to set policy for the league. Now, whereas policy means what we ought to be doing, what we ought to be spending your money on, because the league is yours. It doesn't belong to me or the people that work up there in Newington. It belongs to you. It's a league and it's membership driven. That's why you elect directors. Now, while I'm on the subject, it's disappointing, but we have elections. A lot of people don't vote. A lot of members that are entitled to vote don't vote. If we get a 10 or 15% turnout, that's real good. And it should be that way, particularly because we send out now both mail ballots and electronic ballots. We've tried to make it easy. When we went to electronic ballots the first time some years ago, a lot of members found that a little bit daunting. They either didn't catch up on the email scrolled off the screen and they forgot about it because there's a 6-week window to vote, and that's a lot of time. But I'm here to tell you that you really need to participate in voting, and the voting takes place not just for directors every 3 years in Atlantic, but for your section manager every 2 years. Your section manager is elected. They're the local management for and are responsible to the members to manage league activities within that section, picking things like emergency coordinators, assistants, PIOs, all kinds of traffic managers, whoever is an appointed section official is appointed by the person that you elect to be your section manager every 2 years. So it's important that you vote in those elections as well. And I think with section managers, my recollection is it's about the same percentage. You get 10 or 15% of the people show up to vote because people just get caught up or they're not that interested, for different reasons. I ask people, members, and they just sort of say, well, that's, I just didn't get around to it. Couples say, well, what's really going to change? And I criticize them for that because they can make the change if they don't like something that's happening. By the way, as you can see on the slide, there are 71 sections in the total in the 15 divisions that we have in your ARRL. To see more about the organization, I'm not going to sit here and bore you with that stuff. I have something up on the screen, but you don't need to copy that down. If you go to ARRL.org and you can look at up at the top ribbon, there's an organization structure folder, and it will tell you everything that you did or did not want to know about how the ARRL is organized. If you have any questions, you go there. If you have any questions after that, you can ask your section manager, or John will tell you, call Bob. You can call me, and I do pick up the phone, by the way. My telephone number is in QST. It happens to be in office, by the way. I'm not retired. My day job, I didn't mention this, I practice law for a living. Don't hold that against me. I do use it for members' benefits as well. I'm a volunteer counsel for the ARRL ever since 1985. But that's my day job, and I use it to support my other two jobs. I'm a very active emergency responder in a volunteer service, and now, having become your director with 2 weeks' notice in January, that's now gone from half a full-time job to a full-time job. So I'm happy to do that, and my favorite thing to do during the day or in the evening or on the weekends is talk to other hams, particularly members. Although I talk to any ham that calls with a question, and I get some that aren't members that need some legal advice about ham radio. And it's all, part of just what I believe in doing. So let's, okay, here's the part that I've had a lot of interest in. And this is probably the reason that, one of the major reasons that we need a healthy American Radio Relay League, because our national association is what we have between us and all of these threats. I call them challenges, but they're threats. And these are kind of in the order that I think they are existential threats for amateur radio. First, and this isn't going to surprise you guys. You probably figured or thought about this or have seen this. First is the loss of spectrum. And that's moved up to the number one position in my stuff that keeps me up late, because I think it's not going to go away. It is. A lot of people don't think that our UHF, VHF, super high frequencies, all those microwave frequencies are that useful. They are now, not just to commercial services, but eventually to us, if not already. And the reason we had all those frequencies allocated to us all the way up towards light is because nobody else wanted them. Now, not only does everybody else want our slivers that we have access to, but they're willing to pay billions of dollars. That's with a B, billions of dollars. And you've seen this on TV, and they took our 3 gigahertz band. A lot of hams have said, I don't operate 3 gigahertz. I don't even know where it is. That's really not the point. We do have a lot of repeaters in Pennsylvania, in Atlantic, and all over the country that use 3 gigahertz on the band that we just lost for things like repeater links, high-speed mesh networks that are becoming more popular, and all the things that we'll be playing with in the future. What I would call your attention to, those of you that like to look at all the new toys coming out from some of the radio manufacturers, is something that was a complete shock to me. The IC905. If you know anything about ICOM, they just came out with a radio that looks like the 705, except it looks exactly like it, except it operates from 2 meters all the way up to 10 gigahertz if you buy the extra 10 gig box, and all the ham bands except for 900 in between. I never thought I would see that in my lifetime. Now it's a few $1,000s, but it's still amazing to think you can go to 10 gigahertz and work single sideband with a stable signal. Anyway, I digress. That loss of spectrum, and we'll talk more about that. We have simply because cell phone companies want it. That's, by the way, that's who bought the 3 gigahertz band. It was Dish Networks bought 3 gigahertz, bought the large part of 3 gigahertz. Your league is trying to keep us a sliver shared, and we're still holding on to that hope. And I don't know where that's going to go. We might be able to keep a little bit, so at least we can play in that arena. Now, here's the next one that I think a lot of you, and most of the calls I used to get is because of the erosion of rights to have useful antennas. A lot of you work or live in an HOA. You already know what some of the problems are. Some HOAs allow you to run a wire out the backyard to your tree if it's a townhouse type situation and you have a backyard. Most will not. And if you live in a fee simple, that is, you own your property and you've got a little bit of property and there's no HOA or covenants to keep you from putting up antennas or even a tower of some sort, PRB1 has been eroded. I've litigated some very substantial high-level PRB1 cases, including here in the Third Circuit of the United States, which includes all of Pennsylvania, where they have decided a couple of years ago in the WN3A case, it took 4 years to work its way through the courts and then back down, that PRB1 doesn't really say what we think it says, and that municipalities can regulate amateur radio antennas. So we've had an erosion of rights in that regard. For HOA, we do have a new bill, which just got, you may have heard, was just adopted or sponsored by some Congress folks, and we may be able to go somewhere with that. The next problem that there's a challenge, and maybe some of you have run into this. I get calls about this at my office, is RFI encroachment, noise pollution. Whether that's your neighbor's LED lights, Christmas lights or something of that sort, whether it's a fish tank, whether it's solar panels. That's a big one. Some of the solar panels will wipe out the whole neighborhood. That's a problem that we face, and only having a large organization in which we work together is going to be a way that we can push that back or hold the tide back or cause or get legislation requiring noise suppression, particularly from the imported products in which some of the self-certification is not, should we say, accurate. Then this last one is something that I put in just the last year or two, proliferation of illegal or poor operating practices. That seems not as important as the other ones, but to me it is. Let me explain what I mean. And if you talk to Riley Hollingsworth, that runs our volunteer monitoring program, I talk to him regularly. He was in my office at media for a good part of 5 hours 2 weeks ago. We're seeing more and more encroachment by unlicensed individuals. And I don't mean jammers. We've always had those. We have more now because of the $50 Bofang. That's a whole other story. Anybody can buy one of those and put in the ham frequencies and raise heck. We have those here in the Philadelphia area. Hopefully out at Mercer County, you don't have those kinds of problems yet. But proliferation of illegal or poor operating practices, Riley would tell you the number one is people don't ID correctly. Even properly licensed amateurs will go 20, 30 minutes and not ID. They just forget. They have a call sign. They're proud of it. They just don't ID. Illegal operators on some of our larger systems. I'm a control operator for the University of Pennsylvania network that covers most of Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, South Jersey, up to New York. We're starting to see more and more operators that aren't jammers, but they just don't really want to bother to get a license, don't have a call sign, and don't much care that you tell them, that they're illegal while they're talking to their other friends that don't have a call sign. I know this because I'm a control operator. I end up shutting off the systems. I have a number of repeaters I'm control operator on. The larger ones that cover a very large area, number of square miles, tend to pick up more of these particularly late at night after midnight. When you have somebody, my favorite was Chainsaw calling, I don't know what the handle was. Maybe they were survivor groups or something. I don't know. And they go away if you chase them off. They don't hassle you, but I see that a lot. That has a challenge to the enjoyment of those bands by those of us who give a darn to operate properly and professionally, which we've always taken pride in doing. The reason for that, well, it's the cheap radios and it's all kinds of other issues that are kind of beyond the scope of this discussion. Now let's go back. Loss of spectrum. We've talked about this already. There's billions of dollars involved. And one of the reasons that we are going to be able to keep some of that spectrum, I alluded to this earlier, amateur radio, the fundamental purpose, the reason we exist is not to have some hobby. Nowhere in the rules and regulations of the amateur radio service, Part 97, as we call it, nowhere does it talk about hobby. It doesn't use the word searching. It's a service, but the reason we exist under the rule, 97.1A, is the recognition and enhancement of the value of the amateur service to the public as a voluntary, non-commercial communications service, particularly with respect to providing emergency communications. That's number one for a reason, and this is the thing that will allow us to leverage something to keep the spectrum that we have, whether it's HF spectrum that's going to be threatened by commercial interests that want to do high-speed stock trading. That's a whole nother thing, faster than FiOS for some reason, shortwave radio. Or for cell companies that really do want our 5 and 10 and 24 gigahertz band and all the ones going up to 60 gigahertz that they're playing with now for data communications. But that's one of the most important reasons to stay active in providing emergency communications. A lot of hams don't necessarily like that. That's okay. They like other things, experimenting, using digital modes, doing other things that are beneficial to all of us. But you got to keep your eye on that because we can sell that. I gave a talk this past April, before FEMA, the third regional emergency communications coordination working group, RECWIG, they call it. Every FEMA district has that. Our headquarters for District 3, which is all Pennsylvania, by the way, is in Philadelphia. That's Maryland, Delaware, DC, West Virginia, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And I gave them a PowerPoint presentation. I give to you folks sometime if you're interested. But a lot of the heads, it was the heads of all the state, alphabet soup. You have FEMA, Homeland Security, CISA, all the heads of the state police radio systems and everything. We had about 40 people and they're all department heads. And a lot of them kind of knew sort of what amateur radio was, but they were really impressed when we gave a PowerPoint showing them what we do and that we are the backup to their backup. They were impressed when they saw, I said, think of us amateur radio operators, not as your backup. You have better stuff than we do. We all know it. We'd love to come look at it. And they all laugh, but you have better stuff than we do. But we're the guys that you call when you say, uh-oh, what do we do now? And they all kind of looked and nodded their head. So my point here is that don't give short shrift to this emergency communications thing by having people eyes and boots on the ground. Anytime a hurricane comes in, a tornado touches down, there's a flash flood or something. Hams at the first at the scene because we're already there. Every county and just about every state has hams somewhere. These are the other reasons that we have amateur radio. I won't go through them. You're all familiar with them, or you should. It's STEM. It's the ability to, our ability to contribute to advancement of radio arts. A lot of people say we don't do that anymore. All the high-tech companies do that. That's not really true. If you look at it, a lot of the stuff we do comes from people that are in academia that are hams that are not necessarily being paid for this kind of stuff, or hams themselves. I won't go through all of this. Let's see. We talked about this. By the way, that 3 gigahertz band that I talked about that we lost, that you probably saw a lot of in QST in the last year, is now part of that is repurposed to the Citizens Broadband Radio Service, Part 96. You old timers like me in the room, that sounds like Citizens Band radio service. Remember, we lost 11 meters to the Citizens Band, Part D, Class D, back in the late 50s, I think it was. And I saw that and I said, you can't make this stuff up. Really? Citizens Broadband Radio Service? It allows citizens to get a license to run local higher powered networks. You got to get a license for it, but it's really for the public to do that. You can get frequencies like CB, except for computers. Now let's see what we have here. I talked about this without antennas. Remember, I said we got to have spectrum to use our privileges. Now, if we have spectrum, but we don't have antenna rights, and we use the spectrum, well, it seems pretty much no. You can go into your car and have a walkie-talkie portable or something, but it'd be something different we have now. And if you have spectrum, let's say we're over that hurdle. If you have antennas, they're legal, but you have an S9 noise level, and there are many of our league members, by the way, that have this problem. And it's not from their own house, or it's not something that you can walk 20 feet from and it goes away. They drive the neighborhood, and everything from 80 meters all the way up to 2 meters, it's got something like an S9 noise level, really wideband RFI. It's not just power line anymore. Who here remembers? Pardon me. Bump the microphone. Like I said, just stop me if my audio fades. I'll pump up the compressor. But who here remembers broadband over power line? I think that's been more than 20 years now. And that was a situation where they were going to use power lines to send internet connections at high speeds. And of course, sending high-speed data over an AC power line through the neighborhoods is like trying to pour gasoline into your tank, from a container with a cardboard tube. I've done that in a pinch, and most of the gasoline goes on the ground. It leaks. You get some in the tank. Most of it goes on the ground, and if you're lucky, you don't have to call your local fire company. Broadband over power line was like that. It just made it impossible. A 40/9 for the whole neighborhood on all the HF bands all the way up to VHF. Now, the reason I mention this is because the ARRL, your league, spent $350,000, $400,000 of your favorite dollars fighting that, and it worked. The courts reversed it, said the FCC was pulling some fast ones, and they were, because they no longer have engineers working for them. They have all lawyers. And of course, lawyers like to make policy. They don't care what physics or science says about radio transmissions, communications, or whether broadband over power lines can be done without interfering with radio communications. This is a great example of when the league did function the way that we all hope it will and would like it to function. I already talked about this. And as the FCC wrote once in 2013, we note that a hallmark of enforcement in the amateur radio service is self-policing. That doesn't mean you go and knock on somebody's door. You don't want to do that, but you cooperate with other hams to legally and safely find out where illegal operators or jammers are coming from and report them to the volunteer monitors, who will interface with the FCC to get action from them. The more you can collect safely without breaking the law, I can give you a whole seminar just on that, because I've got a lot of fox hunters, as we call them. They get a little too enthusiastic, which is something I do not recommend you do. But there's nothing wrong with doing some direction finding. There's all kinds of great equipment now in the last couple of years that amateurs can actually afford that can do direction finding. And also that stuff works great for not finding noise sources as well. But we are self-policing. A lot of people don't know what that means, but the FCC will tell you it's one of the only services in which we expect other licensees to cooperate and help solve problems. I talked about this. I've talked about that, illegal operating. So I think I'm going to run out of time here. It's a good place, I think, to stop. Changes do start with the power of community. And that's that way, not just for ham radio, but everything that you might, because it's our National Association for Amateur Radio. I want you to get involved, stay involved, write to us, write to me about things you like or don't like. I try to answer every email. That takes more time than you might imagine, but I try to answer. Or if you want to do a phone call and moan and groan about how we are doing something wrong, if you've got a point, make sure you condense it so that when you reach me, we can have a silent conversation, because you can convince me that you might be right, or I may have already known and have the same thinking that you do. And that tells me that I have some support for advancing a position. In simple terms, I have to know what you want in order to know what I'm going to do. I'm afraid to tell you there's some directors throughout our league that don't really think that that's the case. They were elected to do what they want. That's a little bit true. And legally, it's true. They can vote the way they want on motions and things of that sort to change policy. But my position is the members are the ones that should drive policy. And then if they tell their elected representative, the director, what they want, why they think they want it, the director can make a better informed decision about what he or she needs to do to represent you properly and get you the things that you think are necessary for you to enjoy the amateur radio activities that you enjoy, whatever they might be. So now it's time for questions. I'll Tim, turn it back to you if you want to open the floor for questions. There are no bad questions. There are no silly questions. There are easy questions and hard questions, and I will take them all.
All right, Bob, thanks very much. And thank you for your volunteer service, for being a volunteer counsel, for being the ARL director for the Atlantic Division. We're very, very lucky to have you. I'd like to start with N3CM. Dave, and your question.
Okay, Bob, this month's QST magazine, July, the 60-meter problem, what's going to happen?
That's a great question. 60 meters. By the way, I think it's a great band. Hopefully you do too. People complain to me that it's channelized. It's like CB. It's not. There's only 5 channels, upper sideband only, and you can only use 100 watts. Here's what's happening. The international regulatory body meets every couple of years. It passes some resolutions and motions which bind all the members, the United States is a member, that they want to limit radio amateurs to 9 watts. Why 9? Long story. 9 watts output on all the 60 meter frequencies that would be allowable. Now, what they did is they proposed, this isn't passed yet, but it passed the international regulatory body, but the FCC put out a request for comment. You probably know that. That's probably the genesis for your question. They want us to be able to use the VFO. Well, that's a big, so what? I'd rather have 100 watts on 5 channels than 9 watts being able to go 25 or 50 kilohertz. What's pending is the FCC put out a request for rulemaking. Our position at the league is that we want both. Of course we do. We want to be able to use those extra frequencies, and we'll leave it to 9 watts. That might be okay for very low power, below the noise digital modes, where you're 15 dB below the noise level. But to retain those 5 channelized frequencies so that we can run 100 watts and also be in a position to talk to FEMA and share station, because that's really what it is. Perhaps somebody in the room or some of you have participated in the tests that we've had over the years where the FCC allowed radio amateurs to talk to National Guard stations on that band and other times throughout the year. I've done that. We'd have a 1-hour window where you could talk to stations that were in the National Guard at that time is what was using those frequencies. And I remember doing that, talk to National Guard radio bases in West Virginia, the Philadelphia area, Maryland, all over the place. The argument that we have and that we are advancing to keep our privileges on 60 meters is just that. We'll take the 9 watts over the rest of the frequencies that we don't have now. But we really, to be effective for emergency communications and to be able to talk to shares, FEMA, some of the other reservists and National Guard units that have those frequencies, we need to be able to run 100 watts, particularly for operating from a mobile or from a portable station where we threw a wire and fed wire up to a big tree. 9 watts just isn't going to do it. And I don't know if this answers your question, but we're trying to keep everything we can get. And unfortunately, there's a lot of organizations, including some in the United States, that think that hams are poor operators and we don't like what they've been doing on 60 meters. I don't know where I haven't heard bad operating on 60 meters. And I do tune just once in a while, see what's going on down there. But that's what we're told. They want us to stop having high power privileges on 60 meters. Did I answer your question?
Well, yeah, but considering the fact that Canada isn't going to change.
That's
So,
right.
So here we go. Also, there was a gripe in here about the complaints that were interfering with positioning systems. And obviously, there's no complaints about hams interfering on 60 meters. Obviously, it sounds like somebody else wants what we have.
Well, no, the government wants it back. Now, let me talk about Canada. You're absolutely right. They said, we're going to do this. That doesn't mean that the FCC will, although you can be sure that we pointed out that Canada has that, they're doing it and they kind of know what they're doing. It's a first world country. So I agree with you, but the fact that they are doesn't mean we will. Now, nobody else wants those frequencies as the government interests want it back. They don't think the hams are particularly useful on their frequencies. Why? I don't know why, but it's not somebody else. It's not a new service. If that's what you're alluding to, it's not. So I'm with you. The FCC has to make that decision about what they are willing to tolerate with respect to non-compliance with international directives that we have to respect so they don't interfere with our other allocations. What did you say about positioning? You had a question. I didn't quite follow you about positioning services, global positioning, GPS.
Yeah, in the same article, there was complaints of the possibility of hams interfering with positioning systems when there was no documented conditions where hams actually interfered, but yet they're claiming this happens.
Well, who claimed? What article were you reading?
Page 69, July QST.
Oh, QST. I don't know where those interference complaints for GPS would come from. There's been not only no documented evidence, I have heard no allegations of that. And I will have to look into why we published something like that, where we got that information. I don't think the ARRL has received any complaints. GPS is up at 1.5 gigahertz. Our closest band is 1296. And most amateurs operating up there don't run real high power because it's hard to get. I'm on 1296. I've got 10 watts. I'm lucky to have that. If I want to spend a lot of money for an amplifier, I'll get 60 watts, even though we're allowed to run 1,500 output. So I doubt there's genuine interference issues. The real concerns that GPS users, particularly the airlines, have complained about is the not hams, but the proposals for earth stations to use the frequencies for satellite communications above and below the GPS band, and GPS receivers don't have a real deep band pass like our ham stuff does. They're cheaper receivers. And that has nothing to do with ham radio. You'd be surprised how many times, anytime there's a problem with radio, the public always thinks it's hams. It's those ham operators, when it could be just about anything, and very infrequently is the hams. So that's all I can say about that. I will look into deeper where our sources are, but I don't know of any complaints. I know that federal agencies were worried about us at 60 meters. I don't think that that's valid. There may have been an incident here and there. There always are with hams. There's 700,000 of us. Not everyone is a particularly great operator. So I'll look into that because I'd like to know myself our source for that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And remember, if you have a question after tonight's presentation, it's very easy to email Bob Famiglio. It's K3RF at arrl.org.
Right.
Just email him and he'll get back to you. Another quick question here for Bob.
Don't be shy.
Looks like Ron's got one. Ron, remember, you're in the Great Lakes Division, not Atlantic.
That's all right.
In this club too.
Go ahead.
You operate out of Hubbard, Ohio. I am KE18W. My question was with the regards to the issue with the airports having problems with airplanes and that, wasn't that related to the rollout of 5G?
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that's what he was talking about. That has to do with the airport landing systems. Being a private pilot myself, some of the concerns were that new 5G rollout at those frequencies and high power levels near airports might interfere with IFR operations. In other words, you can't see in front of you. You're landing down to the runway in fog or heavy rain or things of that sort. That there was a possible concern about 5G systems disorienting some of those landing, some of the landing systems. So what happened is the carriers, the cell carriers, have agreed to slow or stop the rollout near airports until it can be studied. They deny that it happens. They're sure it doesn't, but they don't want to look like the bad guys, to the public who's flying. So I think, so you're right about that, but I didn't think that's what he was referring to.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else have a question for Bob Famiglio, K3RF?
That put everybody to sleep.
Anybody on the Zoom?
Yeah, how about on Zoom? Anybody on Zoom?
Hey, real quick, actually, I do have a question.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
John.
You mentioned, I don't know how well this affects most people in Pennsylvania, but out here in Arizona, it is atrocious with HOAs.
Yep.
Is there much advance in that bill? Because I've been keeping up with that pretty frequently.
Yes, there is. We're going forward with it. It took a long time. It took many years. We're slowed down for 2 years, stymied by COVID. But the bill is going somewhere. It's got several sponsored. It was sponsors. It was introduced. We're thrilled to death. I spent a little time. I'm not officially on that committee, but I spend a lot of time being a proofreader or to providing, since I litigate those kinds of cases. My second case ever was an HOA, or at least a covenant type case way back when I was a young lawyer and my hair was black. And it was the type of thing where there was no real defense on it. So it is going somewhere. What I'd like you to do in Arizona, and what I would suggest you do, is write to your division director. Is that, let me remember, is that Southwest?
It's going to be Dick Norton.
Dick Norton. Now, Dick is a great friend of mine. I think he's a terrific guy. He's one of the best directors we have, as Tim knows. But I think, but Dick tells me that nobody complains, and I love the guy to death. He's great. Nobody complains to him about HOA. He says we shouldn't be spending money for HOA because none of my members seem to care. So if that's the case, you call him up and say, well, I'm one that does. And he'll talk to you. Dick is a responsive director. His people in his division love him. I know that. I've talked to some of them. So call Dick and tell him he's your director and say, if he can, I'd like you to support what we're spending. I got to tell you all, because it's your favorite dollars. It's your money. It's your league. We're spending a fair amount of money on lobbying this time, and we spend a lot of time, a lot of volunteer time writing an HOA bill that will actually work and not make you worse off when it's passed than the one we did a couple years ago. Do all of you remember we had a bill called the Parity Act about 6 years ago, I think it was, or so. Maybe some of you don't remember, but we had that floated in Congress, and I was an outspoken critic of it. They didn't ask me anyway, but I said, you don't want to pass this because we'll be a lot worse off. And the people that were promoting it weren't experienced, in my view. They'll push back against that. It's a big argument. In actually trying cases, and I've tried a lot of them for hams over the last 30, 40 years, maybe more than that. And we needed a bill that was much better. It's not that it was a compromise. It would just make it worse because you had to get prior written permission. And then if you had a stealth antenna, that was a violation of your licensing. because they wanted to put the requirement to get prior written permission from your HOA. And if you didn't, or if you had a stealth antenna, the most that would happen before the old bill is that they would tell you to take it down. Those of you that live in HOAs, you'll get one of those nasty grams, dear homeowner, we see a wire sticking out of your antenna. We don't like it. We're going to give you 15 days to take it down, and we're going to fine you $100 or something like that. That's not a violation of law. It's just like, it's like a parking ticket, a private parking ticket. It's not going to affect your license. The HOA bill we had before, and a lot of people had complained to the league that why did you drop that bill after we had done so much work on it? I'm here to tell you that you wouldn't have wanted that to pass. By the way, our league has 3 different books on stealth antennas, but our bill was going to make it illegal to have a stealth antenna. Go figure. The new one is much better. It provides you with graduated rights depending on whether you have an apartment. You can't have that many antennas, but you're allowed to have them. If you have a townhouse where you own the backyard, you're allowed to put a wire out. You may not be able to put a tower up. Well, okay. Or maybe you can put a pole, but they're graduated in accordance with your ownership interest of your home that's in an HOA. For example, let's say you're in an HOA and you have a single family home with an acre. There are lots of HOAs like that you can have 2 acres, but it's still a homeowners association. If you're going to paint your house purple, you have to get permission first, everything like that. But you should be able to put up better antennas, than if you have an acre or 2 acre lot that's in an HOA. And the bill that went through 22 revisions over 4 years, thanks to Fred Hopengarden, John Stratton, all lawyers that were on the board, and once John still is. I've worked on it, and some other lawyers. Thanks to those guys, we have a bill that I think we can justify to get passed against the evil forces that are against us, the Community Association Institute, and that will work for you. So, long answer to a short question.
Thank you very much for that, Bob. Thank you, Josh, for that. And it's N6AA@ARRL.org. And Ron, I think it brings up a good point that we should have the director on from the Great Lakes Division as well, so that we do have a lot of members from Ohio. We're very proud of that, and so we'll do that, Ron.
I'm back on the air actually for a moment. I thought of something. Do you have anything about having flagpole antennas? I was just reading about this.
Yep.
It might help Josh out a little bit if he puts a flag.
Well, I'll tell you what we did. And by the way, the text ought to be released in a couple of weeks to you. It's being reviewed by Legislative Council, which works for the Congress people that have accepted, introducing the bill. They just look for ambiguities or make sure it's in proper form, like a proofreader of sorts. But we purposely put some, what we'll call safe harbors, in which I think you can have an antenna no less than 43 feet of vertical. That's also a flagpole, because that's a magic number. Those of you that have base loaded verticals, tuners at the base, they all seem to be about 40 some feet long, and you can put radials under the ground that nobody will see. So we thought about that. We thought about some safe harbors that you don't even have to apply if the antenna you're going to use is below a certain size that complies with the antennas that you're allowed to put up without permission for over-the-air television service. We call the OTARD rules. An HOA, even if it says you can't have satellite dishes or TV antennas, can't stop you. They can't fine you. They can't make you apply for permission. You can just put them up. You've seen those smaller dishes or some of the VHF, UHF antennas where people want to get transmissions from over-the-air television that might be 50 miles away. In this part of the state, in Pennsylvania, everybody goes to the Jersey Shore in the summer. Maybe some of you do. And down there, before they had cable TV, everybody had a small tower, usually 40 feet or so, with a big every house had TV antenna, so they could listen to Philadelphia 70 miles away and get TV reception. OTARD rule protects that kind of thing. So we thought, how can you argue against that if you're an opponent? if you can go ahead and put up a UHF, VHF, or microwave satellite TV antenna without permission. So we have that as an automatic safe harbor. We have some things about flagpoles because you can get a pretty good antenna with a 43 foot vertical that also happens to be, say, a flagpole, say it's fiberglass, and you've got an antenna inside. And that can be a very effective antenna. It's not that much of a compromise. So yes, we have that.
Thank you, Bob. Last question for Bob Famiglio here. Anybody have our last question for Bob? I did want to welcome Marty AG3I, who is checked in from Pittsburgh. Marty, are you on board here?
Hi, Tim. We're here at Skyview and Cookie's here in the crowd. Thanks, Bob, for a nice show tonight. We enjoyed it.
So Marty, thanks so much for tuning in and bringing the Skyview Club in. And Marty, I want to go on board as saying that was a terrific Hamfest. What you and your team did for Breeze Shooters was just phenomenal. And we wish you great success here in the coming years.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for your support. We have a great team here, as you know. So thank you.
And we look forward to the Skyview Hamfest in late August. That'll be a great gathering as well. And it's nice to have everybody up at the K3MJW site tuned in here tonight to hear our ARRL Atlantic Division Director. Bob, thank you so much for giving us your time, and we wish you well. And I'm very hopeful that you'll get lots of votes here from the Mercer County Amateur Radio Club as you seek re-election here this fall.
Yeah, I've stepped into the director's position, as you all know, sort of didn't expect it. My term runs out the same term as my predecessor, Tom Abernathy, who I'm great friends with, and he's well, everything's fine. I would be running again this at the end of this year. My term expires. I may petition to run as director. It'd be my first director petition for some time now, and we'll see where that goes. But I would encourage anybody to vote for the candidate of your choice if you're thinking that you don't like the way an elected officer does something. I encourage everybody to think about running. It's not a paid position, okay, but it's really worthwhile because you can represent lots of folks like everybody in this room or on Zoom in advancing the mission of the ARRL. And I'm here to tell you that we do have ebbs and flows, and that sometimes we have some serious political arguments at headquarters. That's no secret, by the way. But, you know, the ARRL is a microcosm of society. We have about 150,000 members. And we're no different than other things, even the government. You watch the news and you don't know who's doing what to who and why every day. You know, it's like a surprise. And we're kind of the same. So get involved. Get involved either as a volunteer for the ARRL or run for office. Or at the very least, call your elected officials and moan and groan about something you don't like because they may agree with you. And if they don't, make them agree with you. Tell them why. And that's what I invite you to do. Tim and all of you, thank you for allowing me to come in tonight. I'm going to do this kind of format with lots of other clubs throughout the Atlantic Division. That just takes me too long to drive there. I have a full-time day job. But this actually worked out pretty well. I can see all of you as if I was sitting there. So that the technology is really good. Tim, thank you for the invitation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bob. And I want to thank Corey, W3CDG, who W3JL. You'll always be W3CDG to me. W3JL for all his work to put this hybrid together. I speak to a lot of clubs every week, and this is the best hybrid meeting going. So we got a good one here, Bob. So you got a good example to go against. And this is recorded, so you will be able to access this presentation from the w3lif.org website, and we'll share this with all the members and everybody on the bulletin list as well. So thank you again, Bob, and 73.
73. Thanks a lot.
And good night from W3LIF, W3JTV. And off to Mexican food.